Hello, everybody. Hope you're all well, and hopefully you can all see my slides okay and hear me okay. As always, thanks very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to come to the session today, where we'll be looking at finding and remixing images and videos to use in teaching and learning. So I'm going to launch into it. I will hopefully keep this session to between 30 to 45 minutes. And if you have any questions or anything at all, please do ask in the chat or in the Q&A if you're watching via Zoom. And please feel free to ask via the chat box if you're watching on YouTube. And if I don't get to your questions during the session, I'll certainly get to them at the very end of the session. So the program for today is to talk a bit about licensing and ethical attribution. So I'm just going to go into that briefly enough. And after that, we'll talk a bit about sourcing images, sourcing videos, remixing images, remixing videos, and help and supports which are available. Like I said, any questions would be very welcome, but any comments, any observations, any resources, any tips or tricks you have yourselves would also be really, really welcome. So please do feel free to shout away and make your voice heard. So in terms of licensing and ethical attribution, I'm not going to go too deep on any of this. I guess all the information is out there, but generally, I find it's useful to I suppose just kind of bear the following in mind. So when we talk about using somebody else's media, for example, an image that they've developed or a video that they've developed, there's a couple of elements that are worth considering. The suitability for purpose, the context in which their work is being used and in what they created it for, in as much as we can gather that, the format in which it's being used, anything licensing issue, is it free to use, is it free to modify, and any other restrictions that might be worth considering. So there are, I suppose all of this really just pertains to intellectual property right and just that notion that you do have legal rights around what you developed. So all of this is really, it's not intended to, I think, restrict our use or sharing of work. It's just to avoid exploitation and ensure that the creator maintains some degree of control. So factors included in online IPR are things like who creates it, who links to it, and who hosts it. So there's a number of different I suppose licenses which we use in the current environment. I'm sure you'd be aware of most of these yourselves. Copyright is essentially just rights that identifies that an individual ownership of intellectual property is theirs. So the owner of the copyright can display the work, reproduce the work, and provide plagiaristic or alternative or derivative versions of the work in question. Generally, copyright, if not stated otherwise, is assumed with any work that someone produces online. So essentially, if I produce this work, this image, this video, we can assume, unless I specify otherwise, that it's copyrighted under my name and I have certain legal kind of rights around it. Public domain work is material that is no longer under copyright, so no permission for use or provision or context or even attribution is required for public, private, or commercial work. So public domain material is material that we can use however we want, and we don't really have to worry about attributing the work or identifying where it came from or anything at all like that. And public domain work generally tends to be work which has been, I think, available out there in the world for around 90 years or so. I think after 90 years or so, generally work becomes public domain. So very kind of common example that I use myself is if I'm creating a video and I want to put some music on it, generally classical music is not going to cause any difficulties because it's public domain work. It's been around long enough that it's available to whoever wants to use it. Copy free is a form of licensing that has no restrictions on use, distribution, modification, and benefits. Copy left also reduces restrictions on distributing and modifying content. Copy left in particular, the most famous example of that, or the most widely used example of that, is the use of Creative Commons. So this is essentially just a set of copyleft licenses that identify that the owner of the work would put on their work. And this really just serves to identify what others can and cannot do with that work. So there's a number of different elements to a Creative Commons license. I'm not going to get too into it, but a couple of important points are that notion of by. So that's really just that you give, if someone produces this work and they have that by element as part of their Creative Commons license, it just means that I can use the work. I just have to say this work originally belongs to such and such. Share alike means that I can use the work, but I have to make whatever I use the original owner's work in, I have to make it available under the same Creative Commons. So I also have to make my work available under Creative Commons. ND kind of refers to no derivatives, which means I can use someone's work, but I can't modify their work in any way. I can't make it, I can't adjust it or kind of change the color or kind of change any element of it if I want to use it. And NC just means that it's non-commercial. So I can use the work, but I cannot use that work for commercial purposes. So through a combination of those different licenses, you can see here from least open to most open. But generally, when we see something is available under a Creative Commons license, that just means that generally we can use the work, just certain kind of elements are expected of us in terms of attribution, certain kind of elements in terms of sharing alike, non-derivatives, or not using it for commercial purposes. Generally, good practice in terms of any of this is very simply to, if you do want to use somebody else's work, in particular, if they have it available as a Creative Commons license here, general good practice is simply to give attribution to the source of the original, so to say where you got it from. If you want to, you can provide context or commentary for the material being used. I would argue that's not always an absolute requirement. The other element then is to use only the relevant parts of the material. So, if only a certain part of a particular image or video is what I'm going to be using, I should try and only use that bit instead of reproducing the material in its entirety. And I guess a common kind of element that I use when I talk about this with my students is within MTU, obviously, we have certain expectations of students around referencing and citation and plagiarism. And all of that is really just designed to make sure that a student is not, deliberately or accidentally passing off somebody else's work as their own. So if we think about kind of the, importance of kind of referencing and the citation processes that we all use ourselves, that's a general kind of good guidelines. The same way I wouldn't take work from somebody else's literature and kind of include it in my own without putting it in quotes or making some kind of reference to where I got it from. The same is true of use of media. It's simply a question generally of just making sure that I'm identifying where this came from, and making sure that there's no confusion in terms of me trying to pass this material off as my own. I would say, however, one thing which is worth mentioning is that generally for individuals such as yourselves, there's a certain amount of fair use kind of implicit or accepted. So if you are using material for educational purposes and kind of non-commercial purposes, if you're using material to help you teach students, there is a certain amount of leeway given. Obviously, it's different to, me using an image as part of a presentation where I'm teaching students compared to me using an image to help me sell a product that I'm trying to kind of move off my shelf. So there is a certain amount of leeway given to anyone involved in education, but I would say always try and abide by the appropriate terms and conditions. And again, just go back to that notion of, the same way I would expect students to reference or to cite appropriately, I'm beholden to the same kind of set of rules really when it comes to the use of media. So in terms of sourcing images, there's a number of useful kind of resources that we can use to gather images for use in our teaching and learning. So one is essentially that there's a number of websites that provide images which can be freely used. While these are essentially kind of royalty-free images and images that can be used, again, it is nonetheless good practice to just give attribution anywhere that is required or requested. So there's any number of these websites out there, but some of the more popular ones would include Unsplash, would include Pexels, Pixabay, Flickr is going to be a useful source. There's a Creative Commons search. There is also Wikimedia Commons. So there's a number of different, and those are to name but a few. There's a huge number of useful kind of websites out there where you can get essentially kind of royalty-free photography. There's also what's called the Noun Project, and that's a useful source for being able to access royalty-free icons that can be useful. But Another useful resource which is available to us inside in MTU is actually through Microsoft Office. So as MTU staff, we all have access to various kind of Microsoft Office 365 apps, and a useful one is Microsoft PowerPoint. So if I go into the office.com PowerPoint app, if I want to, I can upload an existing PowerPoint into this space, which will let me kind of edit it, modify it, change it within here. Just if I create a blank presentation there, what I can do inside here, so whether I'm starting from scratch or whether I am modifying an existing presentation, if I go to insert and I click on the pictures area, you'll see here that there's an option here for stock images. So if I go into that, what that will let me do is it will let me search for a particular image. And if I want to, instead of an image, I can search for an icon. And I can use that essentially kind of free of charge or without any considerations around attribution and so on and so forth. Because again, this is stock imagery, which Microsoft has provided. So, so I might say learning about reflection, and I might put an icon down. On the next page, again, I'm gonna go to my pictures, I might click on stock images, look for learning, and I might throw in a photograph. And an additional option which is available to us is, again, if I put in a new slide, if in the, and go back to insert pictures, if I'm not finding what I want in that stock images option, what I can do is I can click here on Bing Pictures. Bing is Microsoft's search engine. But if I look in here under Bing for learning, what that will do is it will search Bing for any kind of learning pictures. And you can see here there's a tick for Creative Commons only, and that is turned on by default. So what this means essentially is if that box is ticked, it means any of these images are essentially okay to use. If that box is not ticked, I'll get different images, but some of these might be under copyright. So it's a useful feature because it just means it will search for images online, but it will only pull up images which are available under a Creative Commons license. And if I decide to insert one of those, you'll see what it does as well is it automatically provides that attribution. So that's a very useful feature just in terms of being able to add in an image, search for and add in images, but that also puts in by default the attribution element and the Creative Commons license that it's under, which saves me having to go off and do that myself. So that's a very useful feature if you are using PowerPoint presentations and you do want to include imagery or kind of find ways in which you can include imagery quickly and easily. That's quite a useful tool, the Office 365 PowerPoint service, which is made available to all MTU staff. In terms of sourcing video, then it's a pretty obvious question, but when we think, certainly when I think about common or popular sources of video, be it fixing a pipe, being it how to use particular software, being it learning about the philosophy of learning or anything at all like that, the first place that I would always end up going to is obviously YouTube. So YouTube is a very useful source of videos that can be used to support teaching and learning. And again, in particular, one thing which is very useful within YouTube is if, for example, I look for learning, something which I can do then is if I click on filters, under features, what I can do is I can click on the option here for Creative Commons. And what this does is it will make videos available that are made available under a Creative Commons license. So again, these are all videos that I can simply use without fear of copyright infringement or any elements like that. And one element maybe worth considering is that YouTube is quite useful because when we embed a YouTube video, as I'll show you in a moment, inside in for example, Canvas, obviously we're linking to the YouTube video in question. So, when we use YouTube as a useful source, because I guess there's never any question that we're trying to pass off this YouTube video as our own, so long as we're including the link to the original YouTube video. Now, a useful feature in terms of YouTube is that, or excuse me, in terms of Canvas, is that there is a YouTube search and embedding tool built in. So inside in Canvas here, what I'm going to do is I can create a new page, but I could use this anywhere this kind of toolbar appears, be it an announcement, an assignment, anything at all. And what I can do simply is I can click on the YouTube button here, and that will let me search for search YouTube from within Canvas. And from here, I can simply choose to embed any YouTube video. And you see there, because I'm embedding that into this page, it simply means that I don't have to worry about giving attribution or anything like I would with an image, because the link is going to be available. So if I just hit save and publish, we can see there that YouTube video is now available from within Canvas. So any if I'm developing any kind of Canvas resource from within Canvas and I want to include a YouTube video, I can simply click on that button, search for what I need, and then that is going to allow me to include a YouTube video in there. In addition to YouTube, an additional way of, I suppose, it's not quite sourcing as much as it is producing other videos, is to use other tools which are available inside in Canvas. So one tool in particular allows me to record a video directly into Canvas. So the way that I can do this is, if I want to, I can click on this button here for record upload media and click on upload record media. Now, if I have a video file, I can bring this in here, but if I click on the tab to record here, what that will let me do is it will allow me to record myself directly into Canvas direct. So where I would often use this is I would often use this record feature as a way of putting out announcements to students. It just saves me having to type out a load of text, and it's maybe somewhat more personal or more engaging way for me to get a message out there. So for example, for this coming, I might record this video into an announcement simply to say, 2, 1. Hi everyone, you're all very welcome to the new semester. I hope you all got a good break over Christmas and New Year's. In this module, we're going to be looking at the importance of how to ethically source and attribute images and videos when we're using them online. And class will be beginning next Tuesday at 12, so look forward to seeing you all then. So we can see there that that has then been recorded. I can click on Save Media. And again, when I save and publish, that is then going to be available within that particular page. So again, just that's obviously not quite sourcing video or more creating it, I guess, but it's a very useful feature, and it's a very useful way of just being able to add your own video into Canvas directly. An additional tool which is available to MTU staff is also Screencast-O-Matic, which is the screencasting software that the Department of Tel provides. And what this tool essentially allows us to do is, very simply, it allows us to record our screen. So there's guidelines on our help center, and you can install and access and use Screencast-O-Matic. And the basic idea with Screencast-O-Matic is simply that if we go into Screencast-O-Matic and we press record, anything that is on screen, which is within this frame, will be recorded. And you can see there it's also picking up my audio. So where this would very often be used is if, for example, I pull up a PowerPoint and I speak over that PowerPoint, then so for example, if I press record here, it will simply record everything that is on screen, so the PowerPoint, and it will record me talking over that PowerPoint. And after that's done, I can edit it however I wish, to add in a number of additional, call outs, features, elements, so on and so forth. So Screencast-O-Matic and the option to record in Canvas are useful ways of getting videos together also. So in terms of remixing imagery, quite a useful resource that I tend to use myself quite a bit is a website called Pixlr, which is pixlr.com. So within Pixlr, Pixlr is useful, I guess, because it requires no installation. It's browser-based, and it allows any of us to quickly and easily edit photos however we want. So for example, if we go to Pixlr, there's a number of options available. If I just want to if I want to get something done quickly, I can simply select the quick and easy design option. So what this will ask me to do is it will ask me to open an image, which I am going to do under here, apply. And what this does then is it allows a number of tools available over on the left-hand side. So something I might do, for example, is I might add in some text. I might say, excuse me, if I add text, I can select from a number of different styles. So yeah, we'll grab this one and we'll simply say, yay. So another feature which is available then is quite a useful feature is the crop feature. So for example, I decide I don't want to use all of this image. I just need a certain amount over here. So what I can do then is when I select that crop option, I can simply drag the frame here to just this. And when I press enter, it will shrink the image down. So it's just the cropped area that will be visible. Another feature, if you want to get very fancy, is you can also select the option to cut out. And what this will let you do is it will basically let you remove certain elements of the photo. Obviously, all of this being very cognizant of whether the person who developed the photo wants or allows, or the Creative Commons license allows me to do this, allows me to modify it for my own purposes. But if I want to, what I can do here is I can select this, for example, the magic cutout tool. I can select the remove option. And then basically anywhere I click, it will automatically pick up on what to remove. So had I the time and the patience and so on and so forth, I can simply remove everything except, for instance, the hats inside in this photo. And when I'm finished with all of that, for instance, I can click save, and you see there that will allow me to send it out as a PNG with a transparent background or as a JPEG with a white background. So Pixlr is quite a useful tool just in terms of being able to quickly and easily edit and adjust images. Again, obviously being cognizant of whether that is something we should be doing, given the Commons license under which the author has made the material available. In terms of remixing videos, then there's a number of different ways of doing this. So one very useful way, again, within the Canvas interface, is to use a tool called H5P. And my colleague, Lauren, gave a really good training session on the use of H5P earlier in the week. So that's available on our YouTube, and obviously within the help articles, we have a number of supporting articles around H5P. So again, if we go into a page, or for example, an assignment or announcement or anything at all like that, what we can do is we can say, we'll call this interactive video. And what we can do is we can click on the H5P option here. Now, what this will, there's a number of different kind of tools within H5P which will allow us to do create a variety of interactive objects. But one of the most useful ones I have found is interactive video. So what we can do is we can simply search for interactive video and select it here. We'll give it a title, which is MTU Quick Info and Quiz. And basically, once we've done that, it's kind of a three-step process. So the first is that we can upload or embed a video. If we want to, we can grab a YouTube video, or we can upload a video file which we have. So what we will do is we will simply go into this MTU video, we will grab the link for it, and inside here, we will put that in and click insert. There's a number of different options available inside H5P. You don't really need to worry too much about them, I don't think. Generally, once you have the video, you can click on the next step, which is add interactions. So what H5P has now done is it's pulled in this video and it's given me a timeline down here. Now, what I can do with this timeline is I can get to particular points of the video which I think are relevant. And using this toolbar along the top, I can add in a number of useful kind of interactive supports for our students. So for example, at this point, I might say, okay, well, I want them to be able to, from here, to access a link to the MTU website. What I can do with that is I can click on the link option here. I can put in the title, which will appear to students. So we'll say MTU website. Another thing which I'm going to do is I'm going to click for the option to pause a video. So that means when students are watching it and it gets to this point, it will pause the video and provide them with the link. I'm going to put in the link, which is www.mtu.ie, and then I'm going to click done. And once that's available, then I can drag it to a particular part of the video. Another option which is available, let's say further along in the video, is we might wish to add in a quick quiz for students. So again, going up to the toolbar at the top, what I can do is I can select multiple choice. And from here, I'm going to simply add, again, I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to add in some useful, just the title of it. I'm going to put in the question, which is going to be, what does the M in MTU stand for? And then under here, I'm going to give students the available options, which is essentially the options that will be available. So Monster, Mammy, and I think Monster is the correct one. When I'm happy with that, again, I simply scroll down to the Done button. And from here, I can move on. When I'm happy with all the interactive elements I've added, I can click the next stage, which is a summary task. Now, you don't have to add a summary task if you don't want to. Excuse me. A summary task is simply something that appears at the end of the video as a way of getting students to complete a final kind of activity. But when I am happy with all of that, so just for the sake of this, we'll say MTU is great. MTU is greater. So when I'm happy with that, I can leave the other options really. And from here, I can simply click Save and Insert. And you see there what that does, it inserts that interactive video into the page. So if I hit Save and Publish, the video will appear for me. And as we'll see, when it gets to this particular point, the video pauses and it provides that link. When I get to this point, the video pauses and it offers this quick quiz. So that's a useful way of being able to take existing video material and being able to make those into more engaging, more kind of interesting, more interactive, more kind of holistic learning objects. Another option which is available to us is inside in Screencast-O-Matic. So within Screencast-O-Matic, what I can do is I can import videos. So for example, if I have a video on my laptop or something that I've developed myself or something that I'm happy to use, within Screencast-O-Matic, I can click on Import. I can identify the video that I want to edit. And you'll see here that it will import that video in, and this will appear to me inside in Screencast-O-Matic. If I click into that video, it will kind of present me with the following. And what I can do from here is I can click Edit, and that will then allow me to edit the video however I wish. So for example, a very common element might be that, I don't need the first 10 seconds of this video. In which case, what I can do within Screencast-O-Matic is I can drag the timeline to 10 seconds. I can select the cut option. And from here, I can drag these arrows if I want, or else I can simply click on this button, which kind of brings it all back to the start. And you can see here, basically, when I hit OK, this first 10 seconds is going to be chopped out of the video. And I'm now working with kind of whatever is left. So again, that's a very useful feature. And there's a number of different tools within Screencast-O-Matic. So for example, the ability to insert other videos or insert new recordings as a way of kind of combining videos together, being able to cut material out, being able to narrate, which means I can, for example, between 8 seconds and 12 seconds, I can put in new audio, which will appear over the original audio in the video. And I can also do things like, for example, tool, overlay, text, and that will allow me to simply add in important kind of text, which will appear in the video then. And when I'm happy with all of that, what I can do is I can upload to Screencast-O-Matic, I can save it as a new video file, or I can upload it to YouTube. So Screencast-O-Matic, is quite a useful tool as a, I suppose, as something of a video editor that you can use to kind of remix video material to whatever format you want. And an additional kind of useful feature within Screencast-O-Matic as well relates to the ability, a particularly kind of useful, I suppose, source of existing video material is the ability for Screencast-O-Matic to integrate with Zoom. So what this essentially means is within Screencast-O-Matic, what I can do is I can click on the option up here to connect. And what I can do is I can select the option to connect with Zoom. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to collect with my cloud recordings, which is under my account, dara.coakley@cit.ie, and press done. Now, the first time you do this, it might ask you to just authorize that kind of, Screencast-O-Matic can access your Zoom recordings. But what this essentially does is this pulls in any Zoom recordings which I've recorded under my dara.coakley@cit.ie account. And obviously, a huge source of videos of Zoom recordings would come from the ERT period. So when we were all on lockdown and everything had to be delivered online. If I want to download, for example, a recording of a class that I did in October 2022, I can simply click on the recording that appears, and you'll see here that that is beginning to pull that recording from the cloud into Screencast-O-Matic. So when we'll just select one that I kind of pulled in earlier. And again, I'm simply going to go into this space and I'm going to click edit. And from here, I can take the recording of the lecture that I gave and I can adjust that to however I want. And where this is a particularly useful feature, and this is something that I've been doing myself, is in the ability to essentially take a recording that I gave in 2020 or in 2021, and to be able to essentially take a particular section of it and kind of repurpose that to help support students in their learning. So myself, I do this as part of a flipped classroom approach, which I'll talk about in a minute. But for example, let's say within this lecture, I know that I spend the first kind of 35 minutes talking about this particular approach or this particular element or this particular framework or whatever that I want to now make available to students as an additional resource. So what I can do is within this lecture, I'm going to find the point. I'm going to find the area where I talk about this particular framework that I'm after. I'm going to get to that point and select tools. I'm going to select cut. And what I'm going to do then is I'm simply going to drag this across the rest of the lecture after that point, or I can click on the button here to bring it to the end. And you see here this hour and 41-minute long lecture. When I press OK, that is now chopped down to just the first 35 minutes. And when I'm finished with that, what I can do is I can click done, and I can then save that as a video file, upload it to Screencast-O-Matic, or upload it to YouTube. And I guess why this is particularly useful is as part of a flipped classroom approach. So for me, a flipped classroom approach, it's not really a digital teaching approach. It's more about really optimizing in class time. So an approach which I follow myself is as part of a flipped classroom approach is that I might set an intention for in class time. Okay, I'm going to free up a half hour during my next lecture so I can give students one-to-one feedback, or so I can get students to perform a certain activity, work on a project, so on and so forth. Once I have that intention, I can identify basically existing content that students can digest themselves or that they can go through themselves before or after my next classroom. And obviously the recorded ERT Zoom lectures are a very useful source for this, because that is all material that I've developed myself. So I know it's relevant, it's in keeping with my lesson plan, it is in keeping with the learning outcomes for this particular module. So once I've identified the existing content, I can develop the existing content digital resource through the method I just showed you. So I want to free up 30 minutes in my next class for actually talking to students or working on a project. I know that in a lecture I gave last year or the year before, this is material that I'm going to cover in my next class that students can kind of go through in their own time. So I'm going to use Screencast-O-Matic and Zoom to simply grab that half hour and make it available to students as an individual video. And then that gives me time to plan out the face-to-face activity, communicate and send it out to students. But that flipped classroom approach really is kind of a useful way of being able to kind of free up in-class time by having students work on material that they can go through themselves. And a very useful source for that is obviously the ERT Zoom lectures. So through Screencast-O-Matic, what I'm able to do is grab the video from Zoom, chop out the bits that I need, and make it available to students so they can go through it in their own time themselves. So I appreciate that was a real kind of whirlwind tour of an awful lot of things, but hopefully some of it was of some use to you. Obviously, we have help articles and so on and so forth, which kind of go through all of the various elements that I mentioned there in more detail. But if anybody does have any questions, I would be happy to take those now. Either if you want to, you can put them into the chat, or you can put them into the Q&A, and I'm happy to answer those. Or if anyone has any questions in YouTube, I'm very happy to take those now if you'd like to put them into the live chat on the YouTube page. So I'm just going to shut up for a minute to allow everybody to ask any questions which they may wish to. Okay, very good. I'm going to take that pregnant silence as a sign that everybody's happy enough. So look, as always, thanks so much again for taking time out of your day to attend the training. The recording will be available on YouTube afterwards for anybody who wants it. And there's more excellent training happening tomorrow and on Friday as well, I think. And you can go to our website to register for it. So thanks so much, everyone. Hope you have a good week and hopefully talk to you all again.